Welcome to Around Town, featuring what's happening in the greater Concord area. And we're back into 'tis the season, politically wise today. And I'm pleased to have as my guest Dan Weeks. No. Yes, I am. It's right. Now, for some reason, it didn't sound right. But
Yes,
Dan
sir.
Weeks, who's a candidate now for the Executive Council from the Democrat side for the 1st District or 2nd District?
For District 5
Oh, District
in
5
southern
now.
New Hampshire, from Nashua up to the Keene border.
They have changed those districts. I don't understand them because you crisscross Colin Van Ostern's district, which is I think 2, isn't it?
Which reaches from Keene all the way to the
Yeah,
coast.
it's crazy. I thought it used to go right straight across the state, but now it dips down into Winchester or Hinsdale or whatever. But yet you go over to Keene. I don't get that. You know, it's crazy. How did they ever? Never mind. Anyway, but anyhow, so how's the campaign going?
Well, I am so excited to be running for Executive Council.
I can tell. I
District
see
5.
you on Facebook there. You can tell you're really gun ho, and it's good.
This is the district where I was raised, where my family has been for a long time. Starting out in the Monadnock region in Temple and living now in Nashua with my wife.
Mm.
And what motivated me to run was the fact that for a lot of years now, since Councillor Wheeler has served on and off in the Executive Council, I feel like my voice and my needs and those of the large majority of our district are just not being represented.
Mm.
You look at the largest potential economic development project in decades for New Hampshire, rail, extending the rail line, which ends at the Massachusetts border in Lowell, extending that up a couple of stops to Nashua and to Manchester and to boost the airport. That project would bring 5,600 permanent jobs. It would add $750 million in new real estate development. It would transport 700,000 people to Boston each year. But my counselor has been a deciding vote against it and has blocked what could bring so much economic development and new jobs and keep young people of my generation in New Hampshire. Or you look at an issue like solar energy. We need to move into the 21st century and ensure that the way we source our energy is sustainable and isn't adding to climate change. But he has again been a deciding vote blocking large-scale solar projects in our state. And so on issue after issue, I feel like the large majority of regular people in District 5 just haven't been represented. And we need somebody who is going to return every call, not caring about what party a person is, but trying to represent and serve the needs of all constituents.
Are you running against an incumbent now? So who is the incumbent?
I'm running against Councillor David Wheeler from Milford.
That's right. And I remember the Wheeler family now. Was it his father and mother who were both state reps at the same time together? Emma?
They were representatives, yes.
I remember Emma from Grange because they were Grange members over there.
Yeah.
And she was a stern old gal boy, I'll tell you, even those
Yeah.
days. So that's who is in District 5.
Yes.
And so how long has he been in?
He has served off and on for a number of terms. Starting in 1988, he was a representative and was a state senator through the 90s. And then he was elected a couple of times. He has been defeated in the presidential years when more people
Yes,
turn out to
that's
vote,
right, yeah.
but he has won it back in the midterm years.
Sure. Yeah.
So if we can get people energized and get people voting, it's very clear that his positions are out of step with where the district is and what the district needs. So if we can turn people out, we can win this race.
But don't you realize that New Hampshire is going to pay to put that rail in here? I mean, you're not being fair and honest. I mean, this is going to cost money. That the state. It's all you hear. You don't hear the good stuff about it.
Let me break this down a little bit. And as you know well, the House of Representatives, on a party line vote, voted to take out $4 million in federal funds to move this project forward. There's a lot of misunderstanding. So the total cost of implementing rail is about $246 million. adding 4 stops, 2 in Nashua, 2 in Manchester, 1 at the airport. However, that $246 million is not going to be borne by New Hampshire by and large. When you factor in the federal money that is standing by to create projects like this, which have massive public good and economic development, and when you add as well the money that the state of Massachusetts through the MBTA is ready to give, because this will bring new business for them as well, the cost to the state comes down to between $8 and $10 million a year for a bond.
Dan, why all of a sudden did they forget Amtrak? Now it's MBTA. That's what I don't understand.
What we're talking about here in the so-called Capital Corridor, cities of Nashua, Manchester, and perhaps eventually Concord here, is really a commuter rail. So Amtrak is passenger rail, which runs up the coast into Maine and runs up into Vermont. And that's great if you're traveling longer distances. But for the daily commuters, there are 80,000 Granite Staters who cross the border into Massachusetts every day. For those folks, including my wife, who can easily spend 2.5 hours in traffic traveling just 50 miles south from Nashua to Manchester,
I use it.
This would be a whole sea change. So
I love the Amtrak myself. I really do, because that's when I go down to New York or over to Ann Arbor, Michigan. I love it. I just really love the train.
To be able to travel by rail, not only would it cut people's commute times way down to around an hour instead of 2 hours or 2.5, but you can work on the train. You can rest on the train. You can
I know. That's the thing.
Enjoy company on the train. So it's a whole different, this would really add to our quality of life, not to mention the economic development. So the cost, we're looking at $8 to $10 million a year, according to the best studies that have been done. If you form public-private partnerships, as some of our state leaders, Colin Van Ostern and Chris Pappas, have proposed, you could bring that cost down to $5 million a year by bringing private businesses in to manage the rail stations. So for $5 million a year, we would be creating 5,600 permanent jobs, thousands more temporary construction jobs, and adding $750 million in new real estate development, which will bring massive economic rewards in terms of not just the jobs and the taxes paid by workers, but also the property taxes paid to our local cities and towns that would benefit. So you ask the business community, the chambers of commerce, the Business and Industry Association, and a whole lot of individual businesses, large and small, and they all say it's a no-brainer. The citizens of New Hampshire want this. The last poll said 74% of Granite Staters all over the state support this. We've got to take this step, and that's part of why I'm running, because my counselor has been opposing this, but it needs to move forward.
I mean, even up in the northern sector, we had a big grain function a couple of weeks ago, and this came up, and they were saying that they want it up there, far as up to Pittsburgh or to Coburg. They thought that there was going to be a train, and I think it still is. I think Maine Central is going to come down through, if I remember right, because that was being discussed that Maine Central was going to do that, but I haven't heard nothing since. But you're right. I mean, they're not thinking it, and I know a lot of it is because the buses don't want them in here. But I also was talking with someone at the airport last Thursday, because we went to my son's wedding in Jacksonville, and they were saying that it's true that they would get international flights because the airport has lost a lot of business down there.
Our airport has been historically an important hub for development, and you see the new businesses that over the years have grown up around the airport in Londonderry, North Londonderry, and of course Manchester. But we have been losing ground in recent years, and this rail would be a major boost to the airport, a kind of shot in the arm as we bring more passengers up from Massachusetts, as well as making it more accessible. If I want to get to the airport nowadays, I can either pay to park my car, which isn't very good if I'm traveling for an extended period, or I can spend $70 traveling 20 minutes on a taxi. This would make a huge difference for people all through southern New Hampshire trying to access the airport. And it would mean when I'm debating between Logan and Manchester Airport, this is a major count in favor of Manchester Airport. But you also brought up the point about the North Country. My family lived for many generations in the North Country, and I was back up in Coos County a few weeks ago talking to people there about this project, and one gentleman pointed out that not that long ago, you could step on a train in North Station in Boston, and with 2 connections, a couple hours later, you could be at the top of Mount Washington.
Mm.
We used to have connections all over this state.
Of course we did.
And
Yeah.
we have seen some resurgence in recent years with the grand hotels up north.
Yeah.
We're doing major renovations to the balsams. And think how much more business we would bring in terms of tourists, but also just new businesses if we were to really think big as a state
Yeah.
and try to expand that transportation infrastructure.
Yeah. And also, too, I mean, I know it hasn't been mentioned much, but I would think the freight would also pick up, too, the freight business on that. But
Yeah.
now, the other thing with you is, I understand, too, and I think it affects you, I'm pretty sure it does. They just recently canceled that gas line coming from Keene over through to Nashwood, if I remember right, didn't they?
This is a major development. So 17 towns in my district, District 5, would have been the site of this new NED, Northeast Energy Direct pipeline, built by Kinder Morgan, which came forward with a proposal. First, they were proposing to travel through Massachusetts,
Yep.
but they encountered a lot of resistance from citizens in Massachusetts, and so they came up with a new plan to route it through New Hampshire, although it would end back in Massachusetts on the coast. The proposal was, frankly, never realistic and never appropriate to the needs of New England. Yes, there's the need for power at low cost for electricity and gas, but the amount that they proposed to bring was more than twice the projected need for the region, which was really about foreign export. And this is fracked natural gas coming from Pennsylvania, which unfortunately has major negative environmental effects. The process of fracking in terms of quality groundwater, it adds to global warming. And we had to decide, is this the right investment to lock ourselves in as a state for decades more to a carbon-intensive fossil fuel, or to take the forward-looking steps that we need? So this was about private property and claiming public lands and private lands through eminent domain when there wasn't a real need for this quantity of gas. It was also about the health and safety of local communities, the risks to our groundwater and to public safety, especially around these major transfer stations that were proposed. But it was also about, our future as a state and how we will meet our energy needs. We could meet 40% of our electricity needs in New Hampshire through rooftop solar. We are unfortunately miles behind our neighboring states on all sides in how we have failed to take full advantage of the solar potential in our state. And unfortunately, the state legislature has been behind the 8 ball on this, but we need to catch up. And so one of the reasons that I'm running for Executive Council in District 5 is because, unfortunately, Councilor Wheeler has been a critical vote against some of the solar projects that can move us forward into the future. It's not enough just to oppose this project. And fortunately, Kinder Morgan realized that there just wasn't the demand for it, so they retracted their proposal.
Yep.
That's important, but we need to look to the future, and we need to embrace renewable energy that can meet our energy needs at reasonable costs while not moving us along this unsustainable path of global warming.
Because you don't get involved too much either with Northern Pass. That doesn't come into your territory too much, is it?
It doesn't come into my territory.
No.
But there, it's very important that this be done in a way that doesn't risk one of our most precious assets as a state, which is our pristine northern woods, the national forest, protected lands which bring millions of tourists and bring critical investment. So there should be a way. The state of Vermont next door was very clear on day one that to bring these power lines through Vermont meant they had to bury them. The technology exists; they can be buried, and so I hope that the Northern Pass project will take very seriously the concerns of citizens about preserving this natural resource of our public lands and not marring it with 155-foot transfer towers.
I know, because it comes through Concord, so it's in my district. I'm watching it because I know I wouldn't want those things next to my door.
Yeah.
But so what other topics have you that are going to be affecting your area? I mean, you've got some large communities down there. Hudson, of course, is a big one growing in Nashua, Manchester.
Yeah.
Even Merrimack has really expanded down there, Londonderry, and over to Keene. But
To me, one of the most important things that an executive counselor must do, it's not about being an extreme partisan on either side. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of extreme partisanship from Councillor Wheeler and others on the council. I think the first job of a counselor, and I carry this phone around with me.
I know, I'm watching that.
It's an old-fashioned handset, but as a matter of fact, it actually plugs into my newfangled smartphone here, so I can kind of bring the old and the new together.
Huh.
But in my view, the first responsibility of an executive counselor is to represent all sides. And that means returning every call.
Oh, I know.
And unfortunately, for years now, as I've traveled the district, I've heard from countless people in District 5 that Councillor Wheeler just never returned their call. And so the first thing that I promise, if elected to the council, and even now as a candidate, is that I will return people's call. If they call me up at 264-2877, my cell phone, I will return their call because I want to represent the whole district. And I believe that as we see today with the national election unfolding, there is a lot of discontent with government. I've had the privilege of speaking with you on this program before about my work for many years on good governance, on trying to get big money out of politics and bring greater transparency to Concord.
Sure.
The job of executive counselor is to be a good government watchdog for his or her constituents, to make sure that every penny we spend in public dollars as the contracts come through the council is a penny well spent, that we have full transparency, and that we're representing all sides and returning every call. So that is what I'm promising to bring to the executive council if I have the honor of serving.
Out of curiosity, what does the state pay you to be an executive counselor should you get elected?
Well, it's more than state representative at $100 a year. It's approximately...
Yeah. Well, plus you take taxes now. So
minus taxes.
We probably get a check for maybe $80 I'll get this year. And we get no mileage. So what do you... Now, you're up, I'm sure you must be up around the big bucks there.
The executive council pays somewhere between $13,000 and $15,000 a year.
Wow.
So it is...
Goodness gracious.
As I think about my wife and I are starting a family, this will be a challenge. You can't support a family on $15,000 a year, but we think that public service is a noble calling. I'm very fortunate that she has good work in health insurance, so that I can contemplate doing something like this, trying to devote my working hours to public service. But it's challenging.
Now here I thought you were going to be a good politician and say, I've decided not to accept my salary, my stipend. I'm going to donate it to the good citizens of New Hampshire.
Well, I will certainly donate all of my energy and all of my time, because I do think, I'm privileged to be part of a long tradition of public service. My family's been in these parts for 12 generations, and some of the people I look up to most made big sacrifices to try to do public service. And
I think Ian thinks I must have fell off my trolley or something, but that's all right. I love my director over there. He just keeps me bubbly, but it's true. I mean, because it is, you can't really survive on it, even your position. I mean, you must get mileage, or do you? You don't.
I think there's mileage. I need to check that.
I mean, like with us, yes, we get $100 a year per year, and they do take out taxes. So you're lucky if you get $80. Concord gets no mileage, but somebody up north or down, they get good mileage. But I do it because I want to. I don't do it because I got to have that $100. No, I do it because I want to. I enjoy representing the people, and like you said, that telephone. I wish I had that thing. That's good. That's a good little tool to have. Because it is true, because people will say, nobody ever calls me back. Or you get their scheduler. And I've already talked to a couple of governor candidates on here about that, because sometimes the schedulers don't know enough about the topic that you want that person to be at, because to them it's not important, but to the people that is important. And
Yes.
communication is extremely important. And the worst thing, Dan, and I don't think you'll do this, and knowing you as much as I have, is to stand up there and promise all these things that you're going to do, because you're just one of 5 votes on that committee, right?
That's right.
So, I mean, really, I mean, and hopefully that you can get a majority this time on there and make a difference.
Those 3 votes are critical.
Yeah.
A lot of citizens don't understand the work of the Executive Council. It's not something common in other states.
No.
But by constitutional design, we have about the weakest governorship in the country because of this 5-member council.
Really?
And so any contract, personnel contracts over 10,000, other contracts over 25,000, they need 3 votes out of the 5 executive counselors to move forward. The legislature, the House and Senate, make the laws. The council and governor execute the laws through contracts and through appointments, from everything, the citizen boards on up to Chief Justice of our state Supreme Court. And so the difference between 3 counselors who are opposed to rail and opposed to Planned Parenthood and opposed to solar and so on, that can stop these programs in their tracks. And the consequences for citizens are very real. I mean, to give one of the most important examples where there is very strong public support, but Councilor Wheeler and the other Republicans have been blocking this, is Medicaid expansion.
Yes, that was a big problem.
The House and Senate finally came together on a compromise
Yeah.
to continue
Yeah.
Medicaid expansion, but it will require 3 votes on the Executive Council to actually be implemented.
Really?
And the last time it was implemented, we had a Democratic majority on the council. If it comes up to a Republican majority on the council, I am very concerned that
Yeah.
around 50,000 Granite Staters will be denied health insurance.
So even though the House and the Senate have agreed to this, have voted in favor, the Executive Council could veto the thing.
Because before it can be executed as the law of the land in New Hampshire,
Yeah.
we must enter into contracts as a state to
Sure.
actually implement the program. And that's where the council has effectively veto power. So we are talking about not just 50,000 people getting insurance, but
Yeah.
a smart investment for the state. You saw all of the hospitals and other
Sure.
major businesses get behind this,
Yeah.
because we know that we pay much more as a state when people don't have preventive care, when they show up at the emergency room in crisis. That costs a whole lot more than it would have cost to give them basic checkups and make sure that people have their basic health intact. And businesses lose out because of absenteeism, because of ill health. And so we need to make some smart investments. One of my concerns is that although Councilor Wheeler calls himself a fiscal conservative, we've been penny wise and pound foolish.
Yeah.
We've been wasting public money because we're failing to make the smart investments that it takes to ensure our public health, to ensure economic growth in the state. So that is a change that I will work my hardest to bring.
Well, I can tell you right now, you've got some, a couple of good counselors on there, but I know you're going to lose a couple of them. But Chris Pappas is an excellent young man to guide you on a lot of things, because he is wonderful on there. And he's going to be a guest in this show in a couple of weeks. But
I've been learning a lot from him,
yeah,
as
he
well
is.
as from
He
Councilor
is,
Van Oster.
He is a great guy, that one, I'll tell you. But and so, how often do you meet as a council? Once a week, twice a week?
Council meets every 2 weeks,
Every 2 weeks.
and there are additional hearings that take place.
Yeah.
And those meetings, I've been attending them in the council chambers next to the governor's office in the State House.
Yeah.
They go through large stacks of contracts,
Oh, I
which
bet.
need their approval.
Yeah.
They hear from appointees for important positions. Critical, the agency heads, the banking commissioner, head of health and human services, all of these people need to be approved by the council.
And that's an area right there, health and human services, because of all this drug problem going on, and places for people who are trying to fight addiction. They has no places to go. They need to either build or expand different places. So that's a major thing going on right now.
New Hampshire, as you know, is in the grips of a a tragic heroin epidemic. We lost over 400 people last year,
Sure.
more than one person a day,
Yeah,
twice the national average.
Mm.
And I'm glad you raise it, because one of the most critical things we can do on the short term is to make sure that Medicaid expansion goes forward.
Yeah.
That's providing critical, frankly, life-saving drug treatment and prevention services to thousands of people in our state. And if we do not move that program forward and approve the contracts that will come before the council,
Yeah.
I think we will make this heroin epidemic even worse.
Oh, yes.
So that's one, I think, important example.
Yeah.
Another important duty of the council is approving appointees that the governor makes. And one of the really disappointing decisions that 3 of the 5 councilors took last year was to reject the appointment of Dorothy Graham, a highly respected public defender who was endorsed by the chief of police in Manchester and the entire Manchester Police Department, by others who had sat opposite her in court, because she had done her job representing people who couldn't afford legal representation, giving them their constitutional right to equal justice under law. But because she had represented people who did bad things, but who were entitled to legal representation, she had done her job. She was rejected by 3 of the 5 councilors, and was her appointment to a judgeship was turned down.
So she was up to be a judge then.
She was appointed to be a judge and highly respected in the legal community, had been providing critical representation to people who couldn't afford a lawyer otherwise. But for that reason, she was rejected. And in my view, that's just wrong.
Of course it is. Now, out of curiosity, Executive Council, will they have the final say on this Merrimack County Superior Court thing that's coming up, either keeping it where it is and remodeling down there or moving it up here?
The courts themselves, I'm not sure whether that is a state contract that comes through the council or whether that's handled within the judiciary itself. So I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, because I know we're all in favor of keeping it downtown.
Yeah.
And I think, if I remember right, the Senate was in favor, and I don't know the House was in favor of it. So, but I didn't know if it had to go to the Executive Council because of the construction, if they get to approve of it or say no before the governor signs it or whatever. But how much power do you basically have over the governor? Anything at all? I mean, can you veto something that she's passed or going to sign? How does that work?
When it comes to legislation, making policy is the job of the House and the Senate, with the signature of the governor.
Okay.
And the council, part of where the council has gone wrong in recent years, in my view, is that Councilor Wheeler and others have effectively turned it into a policy-making body, where the legislature has said, we approve of providing basic health services to low-income women. Planned Parenthood has been the best bidder for decades running, but the council has said, no, we're going to stop this policy in its tracks and threaten the health care in terms of reproductive health of 12,000 people in our state.
Sure.
And so, unfortunately, the council has overstepped, has tried to make policy when its job is to be a good government watchdog and to ensure that tax money is spent appropriately. So that's the job of the House and Senate with the governor. But again, when it comes to implementing the laws, that's where the council plays this watchdog role. So the governor does need at least 3 votes on the council to actually implement the laws.
Well, that's good. Well, we're coming to a close of Around Town. We've been talking with Dan Weeks, who is a candidate from the Democratic Party for District 5, which covers the southern part, some of the western part of New Hampshire, and he has been very active in politics on the volunteer side of it, but we'll get you back on again as it gets nearer to the primary, but we certainly wish you well as your travels, because it's going to take a lot of traveling on your part. People are going to know who you.
Campaign.
That's right. People need to know who you are and what you stand for, and even though you look like maybe a Kennedy or talk like a Kennedy, you're yourself, and so I just know you've got a big job ahead of you, and I think you can do it. I know you can do it.
Well, I feel so privileged to be doing this job, to be meeting with people all across the district and,
Yeah.
and listening to what they have to say
Sure.
and trying my best to represent them.
And that's the thing. Listen. You know,
I've got
I
the
know,
phone
I
at the
got-
ready.
Got your phone and you're ready to go. So with that in mind, we thank you for coming on, Dan, and give them, you got your website. They want to contact you. What is the number again for them to contact you at?
They can go online to danielweeks.com and they can call me up directly at 264-2877 or email me at dan@danielweeks.com.
There you go. So with that in mind, we want to say thank you to my director, Ian Marks, and for all the work he's done. You can see this show along with all the others on YouTube and also on Channel 22 on CCTV. And please let us know what you think. Ian has done a lot of work on the YouTube channel now, and I'm very pleased with the results we've seen so far. So with that in mind, you have a great day, great weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon on Around Town. And I'm your host, Rick Patten.